Today, as we honor Professor Merton with the James R. Vertin Award, we not only celebrate his past contributions, but also look forward to the ongoing impact of his work on the finance community and beyond. His research, marked by both innovation and application, continues to serve as a beacon of knowledge and guiding the next generation of economists, analysts, and scholars. And with this, I would like to present the award now to Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wow, this is beautiful.
This is wonderful.
See? Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Can I put this over here on the table? If I leave it anywhere near me, the thought of an elbow. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a microphone.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me out there? Yes. Okay. Well, this is quite an event, quite an affair, and I'm really amazed that the room is filled, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, let me first say that I am deeply honored by this. Coming from the CFA particularly, it's, your peers, you can't ask for better than that. Whatever it is, I'm really deeply honored, and I am delighted to join the group of luminaries that some I see in the room who are past awardees. It's be part of that, if you like, club. So I'm really very, very pleased. Now, as I understand it, I was supposed to speak for about 30 minutes. I'll try to keep it shorter. Those who know me will say, maybe not, but in any case. But I will really make that effort. And I thought that given the occasion, I would sort of follow the format of the books that you got today, of the 25, I guess it was 25 years after the beginning of the award. And so I'm going to stay in that format, sort of, okay? So let me get started. But before I get to that formally, I thought I would just tell you a little bit about, we talk about uncertainty and prediction. And so on this occasion, after all, it's an award you're giving to me for what I've done. And so I'll be a little bit personal, not too hard, I hope. But I asked myself, how likely was it if I look back to when I started out, not in finance, but just started out, what was the likelihood that I might end up here? The sample path, whatever it did. And so I'm not going to go through, believe me, I'm not going to tell you a life story, don't worry. But I rather thought about, the pluses and minuses. Now, the plus is that my favorite subject always has been mathematics. And mathematics is a useful thing if you're going to end up where I'm standing today. And I loved it not for its beauty, but for its power, its utility, to be able to solve problems. So I've always focused on what you might call applied mathematics. I'm confessing. So that's a plus. The second one is that my father taught me many, many things, but one of the things he introduced me to was the stock market. And it just hit me as something that was pretty neat. I think I liked the uncertainty. I liked the quantitative nation of it. I was very, very young. So I bought my first share of stock when I was 10 years old. It was General Motors. Okay. So that's a plus, right? I was going in the right direction. So it's looking not too bad. And I'll even tell you further, jumping ahead, that I invested in the stock market. Now, you understand my father was a very, very famous academic, but that'll also tell you the scale of my investment size. So it was, I don't want you to think I was managing large amounts of money. But all the way through, when I went to Columbia Engineering School, majored in engineering mathematics, continuing that pattern. When I was there, I found time in my courses to do a little trading. So I traded stocks. Then I had learned about convertible bonds and a few other things like that. So I was in the markets. And then when I graduated from Columbia, I went to get a PhD at Caltech on the West Coast. And I still was trading out there, except of course, on the West Coast, the markets open at 6:30 in the morning, all right? So I could go and trade for a couple of hours before going to class and then doing my research at night. So you can get the sense that I was, in the markets. And by the way, I did all kinds of things. I did stocks and convertible bonds and margin and all this. I did warrants, over-the-counter options. So you can see I had a lot of experience. Now, I'm not going to tell you what my record was, but I will tell you that it was enormously useful experience, because having been in the markets, and you've just been in them. Now, I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I did, but I didn't in retrospect. But the important thing is being in markets, you know how they work, and you have a feeling. And that makes it very powerful when you're trying to make the abstractions from complex reality to bring into developing research. You have to make abstractions, and if you've done it, you can kind of defend it. You can really do it. So these are all the pluses. What's the minuses? I never thought of it as a day job. It was not a hobby, but it was something I do. But it never occurred to me that I'd actually be doing this for a living. So I didn't take any. I took one economics course at Columbia as an undergraduate. One. Paul Samuel's introduction book. I never took a finance course at any time. Now, I'm not alone in that. I believe Fisher Black never took a finance course. And I didn't even think Steve Ross didn't, although Steve took economics courses. But I took one, and I'm there at Caltech, and I did pretty well and so forth. And it came to writing my thesis, and then I said, I'm really not too interested in water waves in the tank or plasma physics, so what am I going to do? And I'm not going to go through the whole story, but let's just say, I said, I've been doing this economics thing, and I kind of feel like I have a little feel for it, but I find it really interesting. And I was very motivated by the idea that if you could just make a little bit of contribution, and I was thinking more of macroeconomics, as you'll see, I didn't even think about finances, again, as a day job, you could impact millions of people. So that was pretty cool. All right, so what happens? I decide I'm going to go to an economics department. Everybody thought I was crazy, and they probably were right. Okay, why not finish up first? And so I applied everywhere, and everybody turned me down but one school, MIT. Not bad. And they gave me a full fellowship. So I've been here 57 years. Okay? I came in 1967. All right? And so when I got here, I had the great good fortune. So you could see I'm behind the eight ball, right? I've studied no economics. First of all, even getting into a department, you can see, if you were doing investments, how would you feel if you had 8 failures out of 9 on your likelihood that the 9th one's going to work, especially when it was either number 1 or number 2 department in the country, But that's how things happen, and that's it bounced the right way. So just to complete it, because I wanted to give a credit to both the institute here, which is been central to my life, but also to Paul Samuelson, because what happened is I showed up to my first class, talked to the graduate advisor, and what should I take? And of course, I had no economics, so I said, please tell me, should I take micro, macro, history? And the person said to me, you take those courses, you're going to be so bored, you'll leave here in a semester. Go take Paul Samuelson's mathematical economics course. Now remember, I don't have any economics, so that's showing up for Paul Samuelson. So anyway, well, I said, okay, I'll do what I'm told. So I went and signed up, and it was a fabulous course. And I really had a lot of mathematics, okay? I mean, a really lot. So the mathematical parts were not an issue. But that's how I learned my economics. I didn't learn it, out of the standard textbooks. I learned it from his mathematical economics courses. Now, we didn't do any finance in there. So you realize at this point, I'm already here, I'm doing all this. I had no inkling of the thought of doing research and doing finance for a living, still, even when I was in economics. When that line got crossed is when Paul Samuelson, I won't go through the whole story, but Paul Samuelson seemed to like me in the class or like what I was doing, and he asked me after I did some things for him whether I'd like to be his RA. I said, well, yeah, it's been pretty cool. First semester, you don't know any economics, and you're getting Paul Samuelson want to sign you as his research assistant. So I said, of course. And then the real revelation, that was the whole point. I went through this. We sat down, we started talking, and he started talking about warrants. Now, I knew a lot about warrants from the point of view I was trading them, I've been in the market, I've seen all these things. I didn't know anything about the real theories of anything, I mean, nothing like his theories. But two things happened. One, we found that we had that mutual benefit. Two, I learned that I actually could have a day job doing research in finance. It was actually something that was acceptable in an economics environment. So you see how late in life I even got into this field, even as a mindset. And the rest went extremely well. He said, well, you know about warrants. You're okay with mathematics, and I want to rewrite. He had done a paper on warrant pricing, and he wanted to do a better one, okay? So he said, well, let's do that. I said, that sounds good to me. So I learned some more economics. I'm learning my economics while I'm doing this. I'm learning it from this experience, okay? And we did it, and it worked out pretty well. Made me a co-author even, so that was pretty, pretty heady. So I won't go through the rest of it from there, but that's what got me saying, I can actually do something in finance. And I love, I told you the mathematical problems. I was really intrigued from what I learned about optimizing lifetime solutions, dynamic solutions over long horizons, okay, and solving those problems. Not under uncertainty, it was growth theory. That was the trend at the time. And so I said to myself, what I really like to do, because I had this little, I'd like to do lifetime consumption portfolio, like under uncertainty, and where I wanted to do it. And that's what I set my sights on. And I was very fortunate that it worked. So I won't go on any more on that, but you could do your own evaluations of the probabilities of my ending up here in finance with you today. But I would say, there's a pretty big standard error in any forecast from that. Okay, let's get started. The first thing you look in your blue book that you got, that everyone was asked, is what are your proudest professional accomplishments? Okay, so here's my list. I don't think I have to explain why I'm pretty proud of getting Nobel Prize, but I'm not alone. Bill Sharp was his first too. But the others, and I wanted a little bit about this, I wrote a book in 1990 that came out that was called Continuous Time Finance. And I think the term continuous time finance, I think really originated with me. Because all the models I used, or the models that I built, had the feature that things were going on continuously in time, not discrete time, time one, time plus t plus one, t plus two, but continuous, okay? And so I took that problem on, and I wanted to solve it, and then as you'll see, I'm just going to show you the references. I'm not going to go through them. But that after 20 years, I decided it was time to take all of those ideas and put them together in one place. This is before Google or any of those things. So I particularly wanted to make this material available as a single body outside the United States because it wasn't available very much. So I'm pretty happy about that book. I feel it was a culmination, put everything together of what I've done. Now, continuous time, the only thing I say about it is to remind you is most everything, even up to today, in practice, really are one-period models. The Markowitz-Tobin model, even the CAPM, it's really a one-period model, okay? And so what happens when you get to more than one period? Now you have different time scales. Not everything is one period, one horizon. You have the trading horizon. That's the shortest that you can trade feasibly. And then you have the planning horizon. It could be 70 years, 80 years, 40 years, or in the case of the Petroleum Fund of Norway, it can be a perpetuity. So you can have a very long horizon, but you have another time scale of how frequently you can revise your decisions. And the first thing I thought about, it sort of makes sense, is the following. Have two twins, identical in every way, and now one of them goes off to Mars and is incommunicado for the next 5 years, and the other one can trade tomorrow, even at cost. they have to pay transaction costs. Is it pretty clear to you that it would be amazing if they held the same portfolio? Lock it in for 5 years versus be able to make changes with new information tomorrow. So I said, you're kidding yourself. If you go t times t plus 1, there can't be any really deep theorems that could work for all of them because they're going to give you different answers. And if you don't specify the time period, you really haven't, you can't do it. That was the intuition. And I said, well, why not do the shortest possible time period if you could trade continuously? And that was pretty close. I remember I've been in markets. In 1967, 68, when I first did this first work, I could make the case, both mathematically and practically, that even if you could only trade once a day rather than continuously, the continuous solution is going to give you a pretty good solution. So I was comfortable making that assumption. But you could see that now nailed down that variable. Now, what I didn't know, and what turned out to be very good, was when I did that, I got a whole bunch of results. The problem was technically difficult because continuous time models and so forth, and it takes some sort of special kinds of mathematical tools. So that's the upfront cost. But when I did it, the solutions all came out to be remarkably simple and intuitive. In fact, familiar. Under the conditions, I'll remind you of this and I'll move on, but under the conditions where you assume that log normality, so we didn't have any problem with negative prices of normals. This is, and that was the prototypical model. That was the first thing I learned out of Paul Samuelson's paper, Rational Theory of that log normal is what people usually use. Okay, so, I'll use that. If the distributions stay the same over time, so the investment opportunity set is constant over time, then when I solved this problem, what came out? This is for any utility function, concave utility, but no special quadratics or anything. Markowitz-Tobin was the right portfolio strategy. So I feel a little bit that, I was able to reconcile a very sensible, intuitive theory. It was Harry's and Tobin's thing was beautiful. It all makes sense. It's easy. It's practical, but it was inconsistent, at least believed to be inconsistent with respect to utility. And when you went to a more realistic model with all the right assumptions, you don't have to do any of those sorts of things. Specialized, but in this specialized case, you get exactly the same answer. So I thought that was pretty nice bonus to get. That wasn't the purpose, but it came out and so forth. So that's what I did. I went on and did a lot of other stuff along there in that. Now, the second thing that I call attention to that I was pleased with, that's on my list, was the intertemporal CAPM. Now, doing that after the first part I did, I can't take a lot of credit for because, after all, Bill Sharp and Lindner and others said, hey, why not take Markowitz and Tobin and ask the question, what would equilibrium look like if everybody behaved that way? I mean, you all know this, right? And out came the CAPM. Now, that was a very smart thing to do, but I can't take too much credit for that because once I got the answers, I knew what the answer was going to be for the equilibrium. So I don't give you it. But it's useful because I asked the question, well, what if other things were changing? Because as you remember in the CAPM, it's a one-period model, right? So you're telling this mathematics, which is very powerful but incredibly dumb, dumb in the sense that it does whatever you tell it. If you tell it to drive off the cliff, it drives off a cliff. I mean, it's very powerful, but doesn't think. And so what's going on here? Well, if you were going to be around for more than one period, then you're going to worry about things in the future beyond the end of the period, especially if the period is a nanosecond long, you know what I'm saying? So what came out of that was that there are multiple systematic, non-diversifiable risks. We learned market risk, the only non-diversifiable risk. Well, when you look at it, and you could figure out what those are likely to be. I mean, it could be any number of things, or your long list, but one of them would be, you're all investors, you're all advisors. Do you care what the real rate's going to be a year from now, even if you're trading between today and tomorrow? I think so, because you're going to be doing more than one period, right? Do you care what the Sharpe ratios are going to be next year? We all like them like this, but they might be like that, right? Do you see that's a risk you can't diversify? You can't. Sound familiar? It's exactly the story we tell with markets. So I only want to touch on this to say it's a pretty intuitive thing once you understand it. But what it did is it opened up that the idea that there are other systematic, non-diversifiable risks, just like the CAPM taught us, okay? And what does that mean? It means that if you use a CAPM or a single factor model like that, you're not going to get the whole story, and you're going to get errors or alphas, not because anything is, the markets are screwed up. You're going to get it because you have the wrong model. Okay, so let me, hello. All right, let me move forward and just say that was the, now I have to say a little bit about the option pricing model. One, because I shared the Nobel Prize with Myron and would have with Fisher had he been alive. There's some confusion sometimes. I just want to say, the reason I shared in that was because of dynamic replication. Basically, I brought when Myron came to me and said, this is what we're doing, I said, I don't know if that's going to work. So he showed it to me. I took it, and of course, I put it in my model. Why not? Well, when I put it in my model, I went back to him and with a smile. This is not, I said, Myron, you and Fisher are absolutely right. The model's correct. But it's right for the wrong reason you gave. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, you used the CAPM. It was an equilibrium model. What I found out when I took your model and put it in mine, you get rid of not just beta risk, you'll understand, all right? You got rid of sigma. In other words, there's no risk. If you trade continuously, in other words, you have to trade very frequently. You can't do this once a week, once a month, or once a year. But if you do it frequently, okay? Now, what did that do? Well, the only way you can get zero from that hedge portfolio, I'm assuming you all know this, when I'm talking about the long stock and short calls and so forth. All right, what does that tell you? The only way you can get that is if whatever you're doing with the stock and the cash exactly replicates, pays off in every state of the world what an option would pay off. That's replication, dynamic replication. And dynamic replication, first of all, that may show that their model was far more robust than they assumed. Because for number one thing, and this is again, they used the CAPM, which they had just finished doing empirical work to show they weren't sure it worked too well. What this said is, this is a no arbitrage condition. That's a necessary condition for every equilibrium, right? So that gives you a couple of things. It means that if you got it for the CAPM, that's an equilibrium model. It may not be a good model in practice, but it's an equilibrium model. If it's a necessary condition, then it has to give you the right price. Every equilibrium model will give you a Black-Scholes price. You got it? There's no arbitrage. You can't have an equilibrium unless you have no arbitrage, so it's a necessary condition, not a sufficient one. It's absolutely, you have to have it, okay, or it's violated. So that made it more robust. I thought that was kind of cool, but it had some other implications that maybe you may or may not have thought about, but that, risk-neutral pricing. How many people certainly know that, right? Where you have this crazy thing, you put the interest rate, looks like everybody is risk-neutral, and you get the right answer. Well, once you understand it's a no arbitrage, that's a necessary condition for every equilibrium model, you can use any equilibrium model you want that satisfies the conditions of the assumptions, and you'll get the right answer. So you can pretend everybody's risk-neutral, and you're going to get the right answer. It's a trick in that sense. You can prove that. That's a way of proving all this without having to know anything about Gersonov theorem or anything like that. Okay, so that's why I think that is what I feel has happened. The other thing I would say about replication is, as you know, I was very fortunate, as many of you, I guess, were too, that finance had become a science, starting really with Harry Markowitz in '52. But by 1960s, late 60s, it had data, had models. It was a science. But it wasn't being used very much. If there anybody in the room was around back then, the old Crew Group or something, they said, here's our quants, but don't let them see a client. You know what I mean? Okay? But what happened was, as a result of things that I'm not going to go through, we had an explosion of financial innovation needs having to do with a bunch of risks that all came up in the 70s. And here we are sitting with all the models and all the data, and it was like made in heaven. You had need, technology, and finance science. Okay, so from this, we were able to go out and bring finance science into practice in a major way, and it's been integrated ever since. And I want to thank the CFA for your enormous contribution in bringing finance science to finance practice. Every day, every year, you've been training people to understand the science in a way they can apply it. And you've played an important role, in my view, in that transformation that has been so productive, not just for finance, but productive for society. So thank you for doing it, and keep it up. All right, so I'm not going to go through the other stuff on there. You can see it. By the way, I have 2 pages, but I have 57 years. Give me a break. I have a few things now you'll notice I felt really good about this. These were ones that I liked. I was answering the questions, but they're ones that I feel, hey, that wasn't bad. I've written a lot of papers. Now, influential, this is the second one on the list. Influential investments. If you look at that, scan it, these are the ones I thought really were, something that had an impact and continued to have an impact. If you'll notice the handle on all of those, the latest one is 1976, which is almost 50 years ago. And the earliest one was actually, the work was done in 1968, okay? So they're old, but I still like them. And I still think they have an impact. And so I put them in there for it. I have written papers since. I haven't been doing nothing for the last 50 years. But, going back to my statement about Paul Samuelson, I did all this. This is not about me. It's about the environment and the luckiness. Everything came together at the right time. There was a need for all this stuff. So all this advanced stuff that we were doing with empirical work, all the work that was really like the option model. The biggest thing the option model had an impact, in my view. Of course, the CBOE got started, and it was perfect for that. But I think it was the catalyst or the thing that was needed, the tool, to create financial engineering. Remind you, financial engineering is the solution of problems using finance science. And the replication principle gives an engineer a huge, huge toolkit. Because you can draw any picture of payoff you want. You can make up some derivative never exists, all the squiggle. Just have a child draw a payoff function, on a graph as a function of the stock or a bond or anything. And the engineer looks at that and says, is that what you want? You want that picture? I don't know. You want it? No problem. Why? Because they know exactly how to go about, first, figuring out its cost to produce it. The Black-Scholes model I've always taught as a production cost, not a market price. Because it's the cost to the lowest cost producer. It's not what you could sell. You could sell it for what people are willing to buy it for, right? And you don't have to assume competitive markets or anything else. So it's a production function, a production cost. For an engineer, it's telling you the things you need to know. One, how much does it cost me to make it if I'm if I'm a lowest cost producer? Okay? And what else does it give you? It gives you the dynamic strategy of what you have to do to actually physically produce it, right? It's gives you those rules. You buy the stock, you buy this much stock, you hold it. If the stock goes up, you do one thing. If it goes down, you do another, right? That's a production function. That's an assembly line. And I think that power gave a kind of self-confidence into the idea that you could go out and solve problems you've never seen before. You can create solutions. And we're still doing it that way today. That's what I wanted to say. Now, I'm going to move forward here because so that's my summary of saying I'm looking back, but I'm really looking at it, it was long enough ago. I'm looking at it more saying, what were some of the really important things that happened that connected the science with practice? And 50 years later, is still being used. Now, we've made lots of improvements. I don't mean to say there hasn't been any improvements. But if you look at the conceptual foundation and how people think, it has stayed pretty much the same. And that, I think is some evidence of staying there. Now, what papers would you read? I put the ones here. I think you could have guessed those. I put Samuelson's there because, as I already told you, that's how I learned about warrants. That's how I learned about finance as an analytical thing, not trading, but just the actual modeling of it. Things like log normals, and I learned the expected utility theorem, things like that. So that's important on my list of influential reads. All right, and lessons learned. I'd better just touch on that very briefly and say, remind people, what have I learned? Models are abstractions of complex reality and therefore incomplete. That means because they're incomplete, they can always fail. So if someone says, I've got blockchain, I got this, technology is great, and I say, well, what if it doesn't work? Something goes wrong. No, it can't fail. I hear that, I get off the plane, the train, the bus, or anywhere, because one thing we know for sure, there's always the states of nature where it can fail. And therefore, thinking about it, no matter how you are, you do not have an answer to a solution if you can't answer the question, what happens when the model fails and you don't know why? What are you going to do? If the answer is I don't have to think about that because it can't happen, that's what I meant. Okay? That's one thing I learned. And I remind you, abstractions is, from complex reality. It's the art of science, every science, not just science, physics, chemistry, life sciences, is what abstractions you make in your model. What do you leave out and what do you put in to make it work? And they really drive it. So that's the other thing. And then finally, two other things quickly. Nothing says about this, but just respect the market. You don't have to believe in market efficiency and all this, but you could certainly have, it's very smart. It's got huge amount of very important information that it gets by all the aggregation going on that no one has. No central bank, no sovereign wealth fund, no George Soros. There are people who have information and knowledge, but they only have part of the story. And if you only have part of the story, you better look at something that's giving you more of the story, because when you get a contradiction between what you think and what the market is telling you, one assumption could be not at this institution, but maybe another one, I won't mention where, that the assumption is the market's dumb. The average person's not as smart as I am, and so I can do better. I don't think that's a good model. So that's my second learned lesson. And especially so in crises. Most people say in crises, oh, the markets are all screwed up. I actually look at it the other way. I'm talking about the big markets, the big global stock markets and so forth, not these other things. That people are still trading, they're still there. They're putting an awful lot of information in there. And when my model is not working, I actually put more reliance on the market, not less. Even though people say, oh no, the market looks screwy. Why? Because from my frame of reference, it's screwy because my model isn't working. Well, but there is an alternative hypothesis. And so I, as a practical matter, have taken that as it. And the final thing that you've heard from, Ken French says this, Campbell Harvey, just a few of the names that are familiar here on the list of awardees, that data mining is just the most difficult thing to test these things, right? Because we don't know. I mean, Warren Buffett could be by luck unless you know the sample size. So, that's always going to be with us. And of course, we have powerful tools in AI and big data. That's the good news. What's the challenging news? We're going to get, a lot of that is data mining, right? It's learning by looking at the data. And therefore, instead of 400 factors, you're going to get 4,000. But we'll have to learn how to deal with that. But those are the three lessons that I wanted to do. Now, in the last couple of minutes, because I know we have to be out of here, so I'm going to just speed this up and tell you. I was promised, according to this, I have to say important investment trends for the future. All right? Well, I mean, I feel like I should be coming to you and asking you that, but since you put me up here, I have no choice. So the three I would mention is what I call precision finance, and what you can think of that is it parallels what you've all heard of precision medicine. where you create very targeted medicines to reduce the side effects and increase the efficacy by having them very focused. Well, the same principle we can apply in finance. The second one is, innovation trend for wealth management, and the third one is dynamic portfolio stabilization. So what I'm saying here, if you look at this slide, and I'll be quick, the slide is my slide I always use for the domain of wealth management. The center one, I don't know if this, this is the efficient portfolio, the optimal combination of risky assets. That's the risk-free asset. This is all that. That's what we would call, that's the portfolio that maximizes the Sharpe ratio. That's what we talk about alpha. You can have multi-dimensions, doesn't matter. What's the point? All of that is to that focus, and it's been very effective. What I'm saying is, do all of that, get the most powerful, efficient engine you have. You can, that makes sense, okay? And use it everywhere. Now, if it were a physical engine, that would mean you use it to race at Le Mans, and you use it to pull out tree stumps on the back 40. Same engine, but you gear it differently. So the second part, which is not so common, but where I see great opportunities, they are evolving, is once you have this best engine, without knowing exactly what it's going to be used for, you just know it's the one you want to use, the gearing or decided is about looking at what is the purpose or goals of the portfolio that you're managing, why are you trying to achieve, and then transform, we do portfolio analysis. Now we're going to transform the payoff function. So if you take an option on the S&P, the payoff function, it's still the S&P, is the driver, it's the engine, but the payoff's very different, right? In fact, if you buy a put, you win when it goes down. If you buy a call, you win when it goes up. So it's obviously very different. So what we want to do now is tailor this. We use the most powerful engine, but then tailor it to the portfolio to improve performance. Okay? That's the idea. And we do this either using derivatives or other contracts. That's one way to do it. You use options. Or you can do it with dynamic strategies, because now you're trading. And we know from the replication theorem that, in some sense, in principle anyway, you can either do it by dynamic replication, or you can do it by buying the contracts, whichever is more efficient, more effective, and does what you want. So you have all those tools. That's what's on this side. And by customizing and tailoring to the goal, you'll improve performance. Now, I'm sorry, but I wanted to show you this picture. I put it up here to show you how to improve performance, but it isn't a Sharpe ratio improvement. In fact, it's probably a deprovement. And it doesn't need an alpha. Not that you want, give me any alphas you got. That's the best engine, right? So I want those. But what I'm doing here is the following. Let's say I have the most efficient, mean variance efficient Sharpe ratio portfolio. I have the optimal combination risk asset. What if, however, for the objective of my client, they want a floor here. They want the exposure, but they want a floor. They don't just want that 45-degree line. Well, you can't get that by simply just buying some bonds and buying the market and just holding it, because that's, as you know, a straight line. It's just a different straight line, okay? But you can do that. You all know what that is. You buy a floor. You either buy a put on the portfolio or you buy a call and put it with a bond, whatever way you want. So that's the payoff, and that gets the client what they want. It gives them the exposures, okay? How can we improve on that? Well, what if you talk to the client some more? You told me you wanted a minimum of 95. You can put as many zeros on you want on that to make it of interest. We wanted that. But I'm going to ask you, my client, the next thing. What are you trying to do with this portfolio? And suppose the answer is, we're trying to, say, fund a pension or something like that. There's a clear purpose for the portfolio. And I say, well, how much do you need to have your pension fully funded? And they tell me 190. And now this takes a lot of conversation. You have to have a good thing with your client, and the client you have to help. So it's a lot of work to do this. I didn't mean to say it's just, okay? But now the client tells you, if I get to 190, that's what this portfolio is about. It's like if your travel agent gets you from here to San Francisco efficiently, effectively, at the lowest cost, that's your goal. Now, they may give you theater tickets. That's nice. Why? If they're free. but they're never free. The parallel here is, if that's the goal, then getting more than the goal is nice if it were free, but it doesn't do me any good. So what if I sell off the part of the payoff that I don't need for my goal? You can see what that happens. You sell a call, and what do you get? Compare this, and what do you see for the picture? For every outcome up to the goal, this does better than this. It has a higher payoff. Look, it's the 45-degree line. This is below it. So no matter shortfall, whatever, you'll always come out better with this over this up to the goal. Now, it's not arbitrage, because obviously if the thing tripled, you wish you'd kept it, but it doesn't help you with the goal. It's nice to get. But what you see here is, at any outcome for your optimal portfolio, any point here, so take an outcome down here, up here, here, there, what do you see? This gives you more, meaning a smaller shortfall. And guess what? You get to the goal when your portfolio hits 190. Down here, you don't get to your goal until it hits 200. Now, I don't care what you want to call it, but if you were talking to a client, you say, you've agreed that this is your goal. For every single outcome, you're going to have a smaller loss, you're going to be closer to your goal. And by the way, no matter what the distribution is, your probability of getting to the goal is higher with the second strategy. Has to be. You get to 190 before you get to 200. Notice I didn't say anything about any distributional assumptions. This is my fastest way of trying to explain what goal-based investing can improve in performance. You will not get this answer if you do this with a standard mean variance Sharpe ratio maximization. That's my point. This is a different dimension of stuff. And I believe this is going to be a big area for growth and development, and one if your advisor is just up your wheelhouse, because you are skilled at finding out what your client wants and making sure they understand it. And by the way, if they change their goal, it's like if you suddenly call your travel agent who's optimized getting you to San Francisco, I need to go to London. What does she do? She just rebooks it, re-optimizes. So people's goals change, but so what? Okay, so that's my talk through that. I'm not going to bring up the last one, but I'll just mention it, and then I'll shut up, okay? And that is portfolio stabilization, stabilizing the risk of the portfolio through time. The common sense to me is that if you figured out the right portfolio for me, and I'm comfortable with the risk, and you've done a great job for me, if nothing changes in my life, or nothing changes, in other words, my circumstance hasn't changed, doesn't it make sense that you want to keep the same risk? I mean, it's crazy. Why would you want to have a 10% vol in your portfolio for next month, and next month after that, a 20% vol? Not because you choose to. That's different. That's a conscious decision. I'm just saying having it happen. Whatever's right, that can't be. Getting rid of random changes in the risk your client or you have for no reason. Now, why I bring this up is we all talk about asset allocation, 60-40, 70-20, all those sorts of things. Those are rock solid things, right? My question to you is, why are we so obsessed with having the asset allocation stable or constant, 60-40? I suspect that's because many people believe that that gives you sort of constant risk approximately. But you could reject that at any level hypothesis, because unfortunately the volatility of the stock market, the bond market, isn't constant. Therefore, a constant mix, if the volatility of the stock market goes up, they're taking more risk in your 60-40 than if it goes down. And just quickly, these pictures are too noisy. This is a picture of a controlled strategy, an actual one, of managing the volatility to keep it at a target level versus 60-40 rebalancing, not managing it. And the blue is the amount of actual realized volatility, and the gold is that. I think you could see from the picture, they're different. And the picture is you get a big reduction. So I'll stop on that, 4 minutes out. I know you have to leave. They're probably going to kick us out of here. And I apologize. I'll take questions outside if anybody can stay. But I wanted to just kind of present this because I wanted to at least say, I got to bring something to the potluck. You all come here. You've got to have something. These three are on my plate to say these are doable. I think they're big issues. They have a lot of miles ahead of them. and something that's doable and all that, that's what to look forward to. And just think about now if you can really tailor things and do things. And then, of course, this is where the technology comes in and new markets come in. The more markets we have and things like that, the more things we'll be able to do. And my one piece of envy, there's a question, what's my regret? I have nothing, I have regrets, we all do, but I feel I've been blessed, including with today, you're here, and the award, that any regret I might have is not worth mentioning, okay? But I do admit a little envy as I look at, particularly at my students, because they're starting this trip, and I can see what the opportunity is for them going out for the next 50 years. They're going to work, or maybe 60 now, I don't know what they'll be, okay? And, I don't have quite that same runway, so I envy a little bit, but you know what? I'm really happy about it. Thank you very much.